Welcome into a special edition of the show. We're really glad to be able to bring you today. It is great to have you there as always. As we mentioned last week, early voting is underway in Maryland. It runs until Thursday. The primary taking place a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, April the 26th. Today here on the program, we focus on the race in Maryland's 4th Congressional District. That, of course, is the seat currently held by Donna Edwards. She has decided to run for the United States Senate. Today, we welcome in the candidates widely regarded as the front-runners in the Democratic primary. Right to left, Anthony Brown is a former state legislator who served 2 terms as lieutenant governor. Glenn Ivey is an attorney who served 2 terms as the top prosecutor in Prince George's County. And Jocelyn Pena-Melnick is a former federal prosecutor who now serves in the Maryland House of Delegates. Welcome all. Thank you very much for your time. We're going to dispatch with opening statements, time permitting, and this is something we expect to do. We will have closing statements at the end of our time together today. This will be a discussion, not a highly structured debate. We're confident that the candidates will not talk over one another, but that we will in fact have a substantive and a cordial conversation. So again, candidates, thank you all very much for your time. We appreciate your being here. A lot of focus, as we said at the outset, on this race, so I know your time is valuable with early voting underway. Thank you again for being here today. It's great to have all of you with us. No one will be surprised if the winner of the Democratic primary is the person who ends up taking the oath of office and serving the 4th Congressional District come January of 2017. So we have Democratic voters choosing from a fairly long list of Democratic candidates. And what I want to do as we begin here today is have you help the electorate figure out where there is daylight between you on key issues and where the experience contrast, where the contrast in terms of the ability to get things done will help the voters who will decide probably not just the primary but this race with their decision-making process.
Thank you. Well, my name is Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, and I'm a Maryland State Delegate. I have been in the legislature for the last 9 years. For me, it's about my record and my background. I came to this country when I was 8 years old with my mom. My mom was a single mother. She often worked many jobs to make ends meet. She was on welfare for a while, but education was important to her. She was always telling me that I had to get an education, and I'm a living example, Bruce, of what an education can do for you. It can open doors, and that is what I want for the people of the 4th. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. So whether it's helping someone with their Social Security, making sure that it's not cut, making sure it's not privatized, whether it's helping someone make sure they get paid, they find a job, those are things that I've done as a legislator for the last 9 years. I have voted on minimum wage. I have voted on pay sick leave, on equal pay. I'm someone that has a record, Bruce, as the Washington Post stated, of getting things done.
Glenn Ivey, in terms of the issues, is there daylight between the candidates that would help voters make the ultimate decision that they have before them in this race? And in terms of experience and legislative skill, let's refer to it as, are there things that you would reference?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually worked on Capitol Hill. So after I got out of law school in 1987, shortly after there, I went to work for Congressman John Conyers, the House of Representatives, the dean of the Congressional Black Caucus, and on the House Judiciary Committee, guy who passed legislation that I worked on, for example, motor voter, to help increase the number of people who were registered to vote. He pushed the Martin Luther King's holiday through, government contracting, especially targeting minority businesses. I had a chance to work on those kinds of issues as well. And also had a chance to see how a House office actually does constituent services and provides the work. Later, I worked on the Senate side. I worked for Senator Paul Sarbanes, who was the dean of the Maryland delegation before he retired. Same thing, very talented guy. We worked on banking committee issues, housing and the like, and then on Senator Daschle's leadership staff. So I have extensive Hill experience.
Same basic question for you, Lieutenant Governor Brown.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of daylight between us on the issues. What I do know, and as I've been knocking on doors, meeting, greeting voters at metro stations, barbershops, senior centers, in my years in service as Lieutenant Governor and in the House of Delegates, what I do know is that voters want someone in Congress who's going to make government work for them. And to do that, you have to have a breadth of experience. So, I bring 8 years, not on staff, but as a member in a legislative body. 8 years as Lieutenant Governor, understanding the ins and outs of the executive branch, working with department heads, program leaders, bureau chiefs. if you're going to effectively represent and fight for and make government work for the voters, the families, the small business owners in the 4th Congressional District, you need to understand how to deliver that constituent services. So I bring that experience to the voters and to this race.
You win this race, let's say, the question applies to all. You win this seat. You become a member of Congress in January of 2017. Your chief of staff comes to you on day one as you're unpacking, learning all about the office. The chief of staff says, boss, Congressman, I think we should make Metro our signature issue. 2 questions. Do you agree, and how do you begin to fix what ails Metro at this time?
I say to my chief of staff that the signature issue will be constituent services. And that means different things to different voters. For a lot of voters, it does mean we've got to fix WMATA. We've got to make sure that the federal government is stepping up. Federal government right now is not paying its fair share of WMATA. We've got to make sure that Maryland and Virginia are also paying their fair share, that there's good leadership in place, and that's an important issue for many voters, particularly those who use WMATA every day, and probably half of the staff that works on Capitol Hill arrives via Metro. So we need a safe Metro, a reliable Metro. But I'll also remind my chief of staff, it's constituent services. So for many voters, it might mean something other than Metro.
Glenn Ivey, same question for you. If your chief of staff says Metro's in crisis, it affects the region big in terms of how people in our district get around, let's make this our signature issue. And then beyond what we all agree on, which is that Metro needs to improve, and we rely on Metro, sure. But what does your analysis of Metro say to you at this moment?
Well, I mean, I think they just had a hearing last week on Capitol Hill about Metro. It was a joint hearing, actually, and one of the issues they talked about was funding, and there was a sharp disagreement. I think Micah, the Republican chairman, said, you're getting way more money than you're spending, actually. I think he said it was like $700 million plus. The counter argument, though, was no, that money's already committed. So step one would be figuring out what the answer to that question is. My sense is that Metro is radically underfunded and that we need to increase the amount of funding that it gets so it can take care of the safety and reliability issues. And I think it needs a line item of its own so that it can get the funding. But the second piece, too, though, the new GM was a very dramatic step to shut Metro down for a day. And I know it was controversial, but I like the signal it sent. I thought it was a big, dramatic step, and I think that's what Metro needs if it's really going to get on track and become the reliable service.
Delegate Pena-Melnick?
Well, you know, the chief manager said that the lines could be shut down up to 6 months. I think that people need to take it seriously. We need to fund it appropriately. And I know he said that the federal government should fund it and give up to $300 million a year, and that Virginia and Maryland and D.C. should contribute $1 billion of that money. I will fight very hard for that. But however, I would agree with my colleagues that the constituency services is very important. Bruce, is something that I've done for 9 years. When people call my office, I'm very responsive. I've been known to get out of my bed at 11 o'clock at night, go to a hospital, go with a young person to help them get into college. That is the type of service I get, and that is the type of service that I'm known for.
When was the last time you were on Metro Rail?
I actually was on it last week.
Same question for you, Glenn Ivey.
That's been a while, but my oldest son rides it every day. He doesn't own a car. He lives in the city. And he relies on it totally to get around.
Last time on Metro Rail?
Within a month to a Wizards game with my son.
Glenn Ivey, I'd like to talk about trade next. I'll start with you, Glenn Ivey. Do you look at the trade agreements we've had in this nation with other parts of the world, say from NAFTA forward, and do you say they have been great in terms of bringing low-cost goods to the stores of your potentially future constituents, and we've opened foreign markets to goods that are made in America? So primarily a net positive, or do you view these deals as being a net negative because of the hit that American workers arguably have been taken and the environmental degradation that we see overseas from time to time as people engage in very harmful practice in terms of the environment? Net, because TPP is on the table now, so net plus or net minus?
I mean, you get aspects of both of those, actually. The problem I have with the trade deals, NAFTA and the TPP issue, though, is, you know, everybody's looking at the benefits to sort of the global corporations and the shareholders who invest in them. So to those companies and those investors, it's been fantastic. We haven't been paying enough attention, in my view, to the workers who've lost their jobs and had them go overseas. I know there was a training program that was put in place to help fund transitions for these workers, but I think what we saw with NAFTA was that it's hard for 50, 55, 60-year-old employees who spent their whole careers in one line of work to successfully be retrained and get hired to do a new line of work that's going to pay them comparable wages. So until we fix that, and as you mentioned, the economic piece or the environmental piece and the comparable pay, I think it's a problem.
Anthony Brown, same question.
Yeah, and I have concerns with any free trade agreement where we're not enforcing the same labor standards that we have in this country, environmental standards, consumer protection standards, because what happens when we don't, then goods that are made overseas, which are often inferior, often taking advantage of child labor, not paying them the right wages, ignoring environmental standards, it puts us at a competitive disadvantage. America has the best workforce, the most skilled and highly trained. If you look at the results of NAFTA, our trade deficit with Mexico and Canada has grown at a higher rate than with other nations. So NAFTA was a failure. Any trade agreement that I support needs to have provisions and protections for the American workers.
Tell your opinion on it.
You know, I actually, Bruce, took a position against the TPP. And the reason why is because, you know, a document that was over 3,000 pages, you didn't even know what you were getting. But the most important reason is because it did not give protection to our workers in America. Our workers here are suffering. Our economy is hurting. There are people that are not employed or are not making enough money. And we need to make sure that they're protected. When you're making them compete with people like Vietnam, when they don't even get paid $1 per hour, that is absolutely not right. When you look at the environmental laws that are very weak compared to ours, or our food, right? The FDA, the approval process we have here, it's a lot more stringent than it is with those other countries.
Candidates, stand by for just a moment. We're going to take our first break here. We're just getting started. We'll come back to more of our discussion with the top candidates in the race for the 4th Congressional District in Maryland, the Democratic primary straight ahead of us. A break, pardon me, a break. Back with more News Talk right after this.